Hi there, welcome or welcome back to Gabby Likes to Read. Today I'll be presenting my bookshelf tour. So I actually got these brand new bookshelves a couple of months ago, so now it's really brand new. I really love them. I love the design. I like that it's a kind of industrial farmhouse kind of feel, which I'm all for. And I actually split up my shelves between different genres. So I have young adult, nonfiction, general fiction, and I have quite a few library books. So if you're interested in knowing about the books that I've read and enjoyed over the past couple of years, keep watching. Okay, so we have The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, and this is a series following, well, you already know what the series is about, but essentially it's a series following 4 children who are displaced because of the war, and they're staying with an old professor. And in his home, he has a magical wardrobe that leads to the world of Narnia. So I have not read these, but I've watched a few of the movies and I want to get to them hopefully before the end of the year, but that might be a bit ambitious. Then we have to the right, the Bridgerton series by Julia Quinn. And this is a story following 7 siblings, I believe, or 8 siblings, the siblings of the Bridgerton family as they follow love, and each book is dedicated to one sibling. So I know a lot of people have heard about this series via the very popular show on Netflix, and so I'm hoping to get into this series and enjoy them. I heard that the books are not as spicy as the show, so here's to hoping. And then in the middle here we have the Adventure Fund, and my husband and I just throw in coins in here every now and then and hope to cash it out for a date at some point. Okay, so then going forward with the rest of my shelves, I'm pretty much going to focus on the books that I've read, and then in another video I will share about all the books that are unread and on my physical shelves, so will be ultimately my physical TBR. So going forward with here we have The Davenports by Crystal Marquise, and I absolutely love this book. This was a 5-star prediction for me, and it did get 5 stars. I read this earlier in the year, absolutely loved it, can't wait for the sequel to come out. Then to the right we have Love Radio by Ebony Liddell. This is a very, very sweet young adult romance, and I highly recommend it. Very much enjoyed it, gave it 5 stars as well. And then from top to bottom, I'll just highlight again the books that I've read. I read All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir. Loved it, gave it 5 stars. It's like a young adult love story, not really romance, a love story. I read The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo a couple years ago and really enjoyed it, another YA. And then I have read The Opposite of Always by Justin A. Reynolds earlier this year. I gave it 4 stars, definitely enjoyed it. So that's the YA shelf. And then next up, this is my nonfiction shelf. So I'm just gonna quickly pan it, and then I'll focus on one side to the next. So we have here displayed The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, 5-star, one of my all-time favorite reads, and highly loved it. I got this for Christmas last year from one of my aunts. She thought that I would enjoy it, and obviously she was right because I had already read it, but I have the paperback as well as the hardcover. The hardcover is what I read previously, so kind of go from left to right. So I read The Warmth of Other Suns, and I have the physical copy here. And then let me move the books that were behind here, because I have books behind here that I have read. Okay, so I read Passion and Purity by Elizabeth Elliot. This follows Elizabeth Elliot as she is contemplating singleness, as well as her relationship with the Lord and her courtship with her husband. Without Rival by Lisa Revere. This is a story all about, or not story, but a book, Christian nonfiction about comparison. And I read this, my buddy read this with a good friend of mine, and we both enjoyed it, got a lot out of it. The Fuel and the Flame. This is a story about, sorry, I keep saying story. This is a book, nonfiction, and it's all about young people who, after they give their lives to the Lord, they decided to pursue evangelism and their different stories. Okay, that was kind of chaotic, but moving on. So we have Carved in Ebony. This is by Jasmine Holmes. We follow 10 women, Black women, and how they use their gifts as well as the call of God in their lives to essentially change not only the country but change the world. And so
Very, very well done book. I love this book so much. I actually read the youth edition after this. This is the adult edition. The youth edition is teal. And I highly recommend this book. Even before I had any bookish content on any platforms, I was hyping this book up on my personal account. So definitely read this book. Check out this author. She's actually coming out with a fiction book, I want to say in a couple of, maybe next year. I follow her very closely, so I want to get whatever she puts out. And then for the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of go through what I did with the young adult shelf and just point out the books I read, what I rated them, if I rated them at all, and then my thoughts on them. So I read Somewhere Inside by Laura and Lisa Ling. I rated this 5 stars. This has become a new all-time favorite. I highly recommend. I also read Mother to Son. This is by the same author, Jasmine Holmes. And this is her pretty much writing letters to her young Black son, and just about what it means to be Black in America, as well as what it means to be a child of God and finding identity in the Lord first. Let's see. She Said Yes by Misty Bernal. I actually just picked this up from my hometown, and this was actually a book that I read when I was in high school, I believe, and I wanted to bring this up to my home library. And I read this. I want to say I enjoyed it enough to keep it, and I hope to reread it soon because it's been at least more than 10 years since I've read it. So moving right along to the next half of the nonfiction shelves. These are actually, this was actually up near the Davenports. Obviously this is this is obviously a bookmark from that book. I got this from the publisher, so thank you Penguin Random House for sending that my way. And I usually have this up near the young adult shelf. Ooh. So let me put it up there. But then I have my Vader mug here, and this is where I keep a lot of my little prompts and whatnot that I pull for different readathons that I'm doing or different games, TBR games. So I will keep that there. But I got this from like where did I get this from? I want to say that I got this from a arcade of some kind, and I won. I didn't win it, but like with my tokens or whatever, my tickets, I used that to get a Vader mug. So obviously I had to keep it. I love Star Wars, if you did not already know. So that's a fun fact about me. Next, we have a book that I read at the beginning of this year, and that is the autobiography of Malcolm X as told to Alex Haley. And I listened to the audiobook on Audible. Lawrence Fishburne actually narrated it, and it was quite the experience. I absolutely love this book so much. I gave it 5 stars. Highly recommend reading it. That's it. That's all I'll say. Just please read it. Please read it if you haven't. Let's see. I read Take Back Your Family by Jefferson Bethke. I've read all of these books by Jefferson Bethke. This is by Jefferson Bethke and his wife, Alyssa. I recommend all these books. They're very good. Christian nonfiction, also just about like family relationships, the Bible, what it means to be a believer. So highly recommend those. And then I've read Holier Than Thou by Jackie Hill Perry. I actually read that earlier this year. I gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed it a lot. It made me think, and I highly recommend this book if you're looking for something about the holiness of God and why it causes us to, and why we should trust him because of that. American Nations by Colin Woodard. I read this earlier this year as well. I gave 4 stars. Very insightful book about the history of our nation and essentially the cultures that are developed within the different regions. So the regional cultures, I believe he mentioned 11 of them. I definitely recommend it. I liked it a lot. I love history, so it was really intriguing to me. We have Gay Girl Good God by Jackie Hill Perry, same author that's over here. This is basically her telling her testimony of how she came to know the Lord and follow him. The Narrative Life of Frederick Douglass as an American slave, and I read this earlier this year. It's a very short audiobook, it's like 4 hours. Definitely enjoyed it, got a lot out of it. It was just interesting to hear from his perspective. I think I rated it 5 stars, and I definitely recommend it if you haven't read it. Finding Me by Viola Davis. I gave this 5 stars, but really wanted to give it 6,000 stars. Really enjoyed it. Please read it. Okay, moving down to the fantasy shelf. We have a bunch of YA fantasy here, and then we have adult from here pretty much until we get to Red Rising, because I believe that's science fiction. And so I have read of these books a whopping 1, and that is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. I loved this book so much. I ate it up. I gave it 5 stars. I'm really looking forward to reading the second one. I actually bought that recently, and I'll talk about that in another video. And then I have The City of Brass, The Kingdom of Copper, and The Emperor of Gold, which is better known as the Daevabad trilogy by Shannon Chakraborty. I absolutely adored this. I read this in a buddy read along on Instagram. I love this series so much. I cannot wait to reread this next year because I really do plan on rereading this next year. I also will be reading Rivers of Silver when the paperback comes out later on this year. So that's it. That's all the books I read on the shelf so far. Hopefully I cover more ground going into 2024. I realized that I never highlighted my little trinket here. This is a F, and this is the first initial of my last name. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so these are pretty much all of my adult hardcover fiction shelves. I have a lot of adult hardcover here as well as all my book of the month. So to start off, I read Elizabeth Acevedo's book Family Lore earlier this year. I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. This is one of my all-time favorite books, An American Marriage by T.R.A. Jones, and I rated this 5 stars. Love, love, love this book, and then fell in love with this author after that. So I highly recommend. I read Babel by R.F. Kuang. I gave this about 3 stars. I kind of want to reread it, and that's why I still have it, because I do want to give R.F. Kuang another shot. Maybe it was just the wrong book. Maybe it was right book, wrong time. So I do want to read this again. Independence by Citra Banerjee Divarkaruni. I read this earlier this year in January. Absolutely loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars at the time, but I think I'm gonna round that up to 5 because I still think about these characters. I still think about this story, and I love this book so much. Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. I gave this book 4 stars. Again, another book that I feel like was right book, wrong time, because if I would have read it through in one sitting versus trying to read it in like a span of 2 months or so, I feel like I would have enjoyed it more. So I'm excited about the new adaptation that's coming out, and I do recommend this book if you're interested in it. River See Me Home by Eleanor Shearer. I read this earlier this year and I gave it about 3 stars. I liked it. It didn't meet my expectations, but I did like it. I do plan on rereading it. And that's it for this shelf. So this shelf here is all of my fiction books, and at the end is classics. So let's start off with the fiction, regular general fiction side. Okay, so we got a picture, kind of calligraphy that a friend wrote for me. Is fearfully and wonderfully made. Verse from Psalm 139. And then we have Sister Mother Warrior by Vanessa Riley. Love this book so much. I gave it 5 stars. It follows 2 women during the Haitian Revolution. Highly recommend if you love historical fiction. And then we have Dream Chasers by Christine Baugh, now Mills. This was published before she got married, and so I have early printing of it. And this is a story that follows a multi-generational family throughout the Jamaican diaspora. So this is set in Jamaica, South Florida, as well as in Brooklyn, New York. Highly recommend this book. I read this way back in the day, gave it 5 stars. Read it recently, maybe 2 years ago, gave it 5 stars. So highly recommend this book and this author. And then to the right side of this longer shelf, we have my Tayari Jones collection. She is one of my favorite authors of all time. I have the paperback version of the book that was displayed up top, An American Marriage. I plan on just keeping that one pristine, the hardcover, and then annotating this one when I do a reread. I have The Silver Sparrow, which I have not read this yet, but I plan on reading it before the end of the year. And with that, I will have read all of her novels. And then I plan on picking up The Untelling, which is a book I read earlier this year as well. Gave that 5 stars. And I want to add that paperback to this collection. But now, I want to highlight this one. So I have Leaving Atlanta by Tayari Jones. It's actually the 20th edition of her first novel. And I read this earlier this year, absolutely loved it. And I shouted her out and just said how much I loved her stories. And I think I just reposted the book. And she reached out to me via DM and said that she wanted to gift me this edition, and she signed it, guys. She signed it. Let me see if I can find it. She wrote a little note. Let me do this. I don't know how I can do this gracefully, but she wrote a note in it, and it's about to fall. Yep, that's okay. I'll pick it up later. And then she signed it. Guys, I absolutely lost it when she reached out to me, and I just was like so touched that she really values, you know, the fact that people really adore and appreciate her work so much. But I say a lot to say thank you to Yari for giving me this book, and I did love this book, and I do recommend it to anyone who wants to learn more about the Atlanta child murders that took place during the early 1970s. This was set in that time frame, and Tayari actually lived through that time period, and she wrote from that point of view. So definitely recommend it. Please read it. Next, we have a couple historical romance stories. So I read A Duke, the Lady, and a Baby by Vanessa Riley. Loved it. Gave it 4 stars. I read Mr. Malcolm's List by Susanna Lane. Loved it. Gave it 5 stars. And then Incognito by Susanna Lane. Read it. Loved it. I think I gave this 5 stars. But if I didn't, I gave it definitely a 4.5 or 4 stars. Definitely recommend this author. And obviously, Vanessa Riley. Love her work. And then we have the classics side of the shelf. So we have Jane Eyre, read it. I believe I gave this 5 stars. I need to double check and see. But absolutely love this book. I have this edition because I picked this up from my childhood home. My mom had kept it for me. It was a gift from my aunt, and she never wanted to leave my library. I tried to read Jane Eyre when I was younger. I just did not get it. But I read it last year, and I absolutely loved it. So I'm glad I picked it up because I really did enjoy it. And then I also have this edition of it, which I believe was from a school library sale. It has the book Jane Eyre as well as some related readings in it, like novels and short stories. So I'm glad I have that. I got that from home as well. Passing by Nella Larson, an all-time fave. Love, love, love this book. It's a classic, a modern classic set in the 1920s and written in the 1920s about 2 young women who are Black but can both pass for white. One actually goes forward and decides to pass for white, while the other decides to be fully engrafted into the Black community. And they reunite after being apart for a number of years because they grew up in the same place. And yeah, you see what the consequences of their decisions, what it yields. Love this book, highly recommend. So next we have Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility. I think I rated this 5 stars. I read this earlier this year and loved it. I really appreciated this book so much. I read it and fell in love with the characters all over again. I'd watched the movie, I think it's the 1995 adaptation, whichever one with Kate Winslet and Emma Thompson, and it's one of my all-time favorite movies. So I was kind of like, oh, am I gonna like the book? I don't know, but I definitely did enjoy the book, and I'm looking forward to rereading it in the future and annotating. Next, we got Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I read this one last year via audio, really loved it. I knew that I had the hardcover back at home, and so I didn't want to purchase it and have multiple copies like I did of Jane Eyre, just kidding. But my mom had it for me back at my old house, so I was able to pick that up recently, so that's there. And then To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Read this one, I want to say last year via audio. Enjoyed it. I don't remember if I read it in school or not when I was younger, but in any case, I read it recently, enjoyed it. It's a new favorite, so I am glad I have a physical copy. Okay, so down here we have what will be my library shelf. This is where all of my library books, this is where all of my library books are going to be housed. And so I also have, to the left there are 2 Bibles. The top one that's kind of maroon or burgundy is the first Bible I ever received. It was from preschool when I was 4 years old, and I'm glad that I still have it and own it. And then I have a beginner's Bible that I want to say was a gift from someone, maybe my grandparents at one point, and I still have it, so I definitely want to hold on to that one as well. And then you see a couple of my library holds that I have currently. Some of them I read or attempted to read, and others that I still need to get to yet. The ones that are kind of stacked from the bottom to top: Mexican Gothic I read and gave it 2 stars. Falling I read and gave it 4 stars. Saving Savannah I read and gave 5 stars. And I DNF the Happily Ever After playlist. If you want more thoughts about any of my thoughts on those books, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll feel free to talk about it down there. And then I have books that I plan on reading hopefully very soon is So Many Beginnings by B.C. Morrow, The Social Graces by, I think it's Renee Rosen, All That Is Secret by Patricia Rayburn, and We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faisal. So those are the library books that I have here that I plan to get to before the end of the month. Wish me luck.
Okay, that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know in the comments below what you're currently reading. And if you haven't read in a while, that's totally fine. How about you let me know your guess for the amount of unread books that I have on my shelves? So thank you so much again, and please take care. I'll see you in the next one.